What's going on, everybody? Welcome to the HG Sports Podcast, your number one place for the NFL Weekly Recap, preview, news, basically your NFL roundabout every single week. I'm your host, Jacob. It's October 30th, 2019 when I'm recording this, and welcome to the second episode, but I kind of consider this my number one full episode that I've had before, that I've ever had, I guess I should say. So here's what I got on to today's slate. I have the NFL recap. I have takeaways from every single game, including last week's Thursday night football, Monday night football, takeaways from every single game of last week on Sunday. Then after that, I will be going into my interesting games of week 9. I only have 2 this week, different from the 3 last week that I had. Then I have the most impactful trades the past couple of weeks leading up to the trade deadline. I have 6 of those. And then I have my picks, my personal picks for the midseason awards for the NFL. A little bit of a longer show than I had last week. Kind of understandable since I kind of threw everything together last week. This week was really put together. Man, I really didn't realize how much work and time consuming this whole podcast thing is, but honestly I love it just because I love talking about the NFL, writing it up, and it keeps me more informed than I was beforehand. So it's good all around. Alrighty, let's get right into it. So let's start off with the NFL recap of last week. Start off with Thursday night football. Here's my takeaways. It was a win for the Minnesota Vikings, and let's go over their stuff first. Dalvin Cook is continuing to dominate the NFL season. 23 carries for 98 yards, scoring the only touchdown of the night. Those numbers put Dalvin Cook at 823 yards for the year, also pairing that with 9 touchdowns, 5.3 yards per attempt for the entire year. He sits only behind, in my opinion, Christian McCaffrey for running backs this year. I still think Christian McCaffrey, even though Dalvin Cook leads a lot in the stats category, I still think Christian McCaffrey takes over the games more than Dalvin Cook can. That's why I think Christian McCaffrey's still having a better 2019 year when it comes to the running backs, but he's only second to him. It's not like he's way behind. I also want to say, too, that if you watch the game and you watched Dalvin Cook go out and you watch Alexander Mattison come in, 13 carries, 61 yards, and those 61 yards were not given to him. He fought for a lot of his yards. He was very hard-nosed running. There was a couple of runs there where he did a couple spin moves, trucked people. If he goes down with another injury, knock on wood, then I think they're going to be okay, and I think that they're going to still be able to run the ball the way that they want to. I know that with Dalvin Cook coming back this season and having a perfectly full season of health, they really wanted to employ the smash mouth football and have the defense do a lot of the work for the Vikings, and that's what's happened. Have Kirk Cousins do the minimum amount of work that he's had to do this season. Because if you have Kirk Cousins try to do too much, then you're not going to get the version of Kirk Cousins that you want. Speaking of Kirk Cousins and Stephon Diggs, I don't think Stephon Diggs will really be complaining or creating any more locker room drama after the past 3 games. Diggs has had 453 yards in the past 3 games. That's a Minnesota Vikings record for the most yards in 3 consecutive games, previously held by none other than the Hall of Famer Randy Moss. In 2001, he did that. Kirk Cousins and Stephon Diggs, the rest of the offense continues to look good in the past couple of games since the drama surrounded the locker room. Kirk Cousins got called out a couple weeks ago, if you didn't know, got called out by Adam Thielen. Stephon Diggs wanted to trade. He wasn't happy, and since then, he's looked good. But the problem is that the past 3 opponents haven't been very challenging for Kirk Cousins or the Minnesota Vikings. So we'll see coming up in the upcoming weeks whether or not this type of play will continue for Kirk Cousins, or if we're going to see him break down against the really good teams, break down in the fourth quarter, not be clutch, and really look like the same old Kirk Cousins we're used to, the choking in big moments, choking in big games, not shining not playing well while the spotlight is shining on him type of Kirk Cousins that we're all kind of expecting. Anyways, that's my takeaways for the Minnesota Vikings. Kind of quick, not a lot to say about the game really, but let's move on to the Washington Redskins. Adrian Peterson in this game moved into sixth place for the NFL's all-time rushing list, passing LaDainian Tomlinson and someone else. I forgot who. Tell me down in the comments who it was. I can't remember. And he did it against his former team. Funny enough. Congrats to him. To me, he's the most electrifying runner of this generation. When I first started getting into football, is when Adrian Peterson was still at the top of his game. He was in his prime. Just watching Adrian Peterson highlights has always been such a joy for me. Even when I was a kid, watching him on YouTube was probably one of the best things I would look up. Between him and LeGarrette Blount, funny enough, it's kind of weird, the compare and contrast type of thing. You have Adrian Peterson, one of the best runners of all time, and then you have LeGarrette Blount, which is just not one of the best runners of all time, but he was definitely a bruiser, and he had the highlights that I really, really enjoyed. Anyways, but he was one of the most electrifying runners of all time, probably the best runner of this generation, and congrats to him. Past that was pretty much the only thing that looked good on Washington's offense. And not saying that he looked good, I'm just saying that's the only thing that came of that Washington offense this last Thursday. Washington offensive line looked awful, giving up 3 sacks, 2 of which Case Keenum fumbled on. 4 tackles for losses. If they're wanting to ever put Dewayne Haskins in at quarterback and want him to be successful, they're going to need to spend the drafting talented O-linemen. They're ranked 20th in the NFL when it comes to the offensive line. And honestly, until Dewayne Haskins is ready to be put in, even if he is ready, the offensive line is so awful and wretched that I don't think it'd be worth it to put him in. His development is not going as planned. I don't think he was that good coming out of the draft, but I definitely don't think so when you're not even putting in the work. You see him on the sidelines. You see most of the backup quarterbacks in the NFL, or especially the young ones, they have an earpiece and they're standing next to the starter and they're with the starter and the quarterback's coach or the offensive coordinator, sitting there and talking to him while they're doing the going over the previous play or the previous drive. And he's just not doing it. He's sitting by himself. He's sitting there laughing and talking to his other teammates, and it just kind of shows his immaturity that he's not ready to be an NFL starting quarterback, especially if he's not willing to put in that type of work. I don't think he'll probably ever be a good NFL starting quarterback. I think he's probably the worst quarterback to come out of the draft, especially if he doesn't want to put the work in. It kind of just solidifies that opinion that I have. And again, it's an opinion. It's not a fact, but that's just my gut feeling on it, and it's always been my gut feeling on it when it comes to him. Outside of that, I really like how Terry McLaurin has looked so far as a rookie. 6 targets, hauling in 4 of them for 39 yards, which led the team this past game. Numbers don't really jump out at you. It's a tough Vikings defense. He still led the team in receptions, yards, and targets as a rookie, which I know doesn't say a lot for who they have as wide receivers, but he looks good. Genuinely, he looks good. Again, numbers don't really jump off the page at you, but if you watch him play, genuinely watch him play, not just the highlights, not just the flashy moments, but watch him play, he's impressive. He's very, very impressive, and I think he has a very impressive long career. I think we're going to see him kind of take the jump, in the 3rd or 4th year, as we do with a lot of wide receivers, unless you're an absolute monster. But I think we're going to see slow development for Terry McLaurin in the 1st year and the 2nd year. And I think the 3rd or 4th year, if Washington can get a decent quarterback out there, I think we're really going to see a big development when it comes to Terry McLaurin and how he's going to look in his third and 4th year. But that's all my takeaways for the Thursday night football of last week. I know it seemed like so long ago. Quick little recap of it. Not really too much happened with the game. I wasn't too impressed. Dan Bailey continues to look like Dan Bailey, and I love Dan Bailey. If you guys didn't know, I'm a Cowboys fan, and I always wish the best for that man, just for the pure fact of he was a Cowboys kicker, and I was very upset when we let him go. And it's nice to see him actually have some success with another team and be successful with a successful team. So I'm always rooting for him. Alrighty, so how this is going to work for the takeaways is I'm going to do at least one takeaway for each game. I don't know if I'm going to do this every single Sunday. I went more into depth with some of the games than others. Some of the games were more exciting than others, as it's going to be every single Sunday. So let's go ahead and start off with the Broncos and Colts. With the Colts taking the victory 13-15, I know a lot of people would say this is a snooze fest or this wasn't a very good game, but to me, it was a very good defensive battle between the two AFC teams. Denver allowing the 15 points, but 2 forced fumbles, 3 sacks, 7 tackles for losses. Colts allowing only 12 points, 1 forced fumble, 3 sacks, 6 tackles for losses. I don't really believe that either offense really looked awful. I think that the defenses were just playing really, really, really well over the offenses just looking bad. You know, the defenses were making them look bad. The offenses weren't really stumbling over themselves. Jacoby Brissett looked really impressive when the time mattered. He got his third fourth quarter comeback this game. And, you know, good for him. I think the Colts are definitely they're a Cinderella story, and I think they do have the potential to make a deep playoff run. I think they're the second most put together team in the NFL outside of the Saints, which I will be talking about a little bit later on. I think Jacoby Brissett doesn't get talked about enough because Andrew Luck retired. They look good. Everybody kind of probably seems like it's a little fluky, but genuinely they're a very good team. Good offensive line, good receivers, really good defense when they're healthy. They got Darius Leonard back. I believe it was last game, not with the Broncos, but with whoever they played last. And then I might be wrong at that. Let me know in the comments. But Darius Leonard is a monster, and he makes all the difference in the world, especially when playing middle linebacker. Is basically the quarterback spot of defense. So and then I just want to talk about one more thing. I'll talk about Adam Vinatieri. It's kind of sad seeing Adam Vinatieri kicking like this. He's kicking 11 for 15 on the year, 73.3% percentage. It's his lowest in his entire career. He's also kicking 76.5% for his extra points. I believe, honestly, if this was anybody else other than Adam Vinatieri, I think he probably would have been cut. Since it's Adam Vinatieri, I think he can redeem himself. Do I think he should retire? That's not really my call to make. I think that you let it ride out for the entire year, and then next year, if he continues to kick badly and if he costs you games or costs you a playoff game or something, then yeah, maybe you should sit down and have the talk with Adam Vinatieri and let him retire on his own terms. It's hard to cut a legendary football player like that. A first ballot Hall of Famer for a kicker isn't normal. And he's one of those first ballot Hall of Famer guys who needs to be a first ballot Hall of Famer. And you can't really cut a guy like that. You need him to retire on his own terms. And maybe he should be having that conversation with himself this offseason, how he feels and how he feels about his body and going into next year. Just something to take a look at and keep an eye on for the rest of the season and leading into next offseason and next year. Alrighty, let's move on to the Buccaneers versus the Titans, with the Titans taking this game 27-23. And a couple of takeaways, this one for both teams. If the Tennessee Titans want any chance of winning games, they need to keep Ryan Tannehill as the starting quarterback. Marcus Mariota's played his last game as a Tennessee Titan, I believe. I think Marcus Mariota has a future in the NFL as a starting quarterback, but he needs to do it somewhere else. He needs a fresh, clean slate. Everybody needs to kind of stop having such high expectations as the number 2 overall pick that Marcus Mariota was. And they need to have the expectation of how he's played so far in his career. He needs to go somewhere where their quarterback isn't very good and they need a quarterback, maybe the Broncos or Chicago. I know that's a little controversial, but he needs to go to Chicago, the Broncos, anywhere that really needs a starting caliber quarterback. Don't go to the Dolphins. that's a dumpster fire of a team, and I think that's the last thing Marcus Mariota would want. I think if any quarterback in the NFL goes to the Dolphins at this point and they want a real career, their career is over at that point. I don't think anyone could bring that team back just immediately. They're gonna have a lot of years trying to come back from what they have going on. Anyways, and then my next takeaway is Chris Godwin and Mike Evans are the most talented wide receiver duo in the entire league. Maybe their numbers don't show it, even though their numbers are very good. But even if their numbers don't show it, you gotta remember who's passing them the ball. Let's talk about the numbers. Godwin, it has 47 receptions, and Evans has 38. 705 yards for Godwin and 662 for Evans. 6 touchdowns for Godwin, 6 touchdowns for Evans. That's when Jameis Winston is throwing them the ball. And again, you got to remember who's throwing them the ball. This is probably the most inconsistent quarterback in the league. I'm so torn on whether the Buccaneers should re-sign Jameis Winston to a deal, because he has these games where he looks like a legitimate number one quarterback, and he's a top 15, top 12 quarterback in the league at that point. Seriously. But then he goes and he has points where he looks like a bottom 5 quarterback, and his turnovers, he's not a second-year guy. He's not a third-year guy. He's been in the league since I was a junior in high school. So he that's who's throwing them the ball, and that's something that needs to be remembered. Maybe the numbers don't show it. Maybe you believe it's Thielen and Diggs, or maybe you think it's Michael Gallup and Amari Cooper. Maybe you think it's someone else. I think it's Chris Godwin and Mike Evans. I really enjoy both of them. I believe no matter where the two end up in their careers, they're both number ones no matter where they go, because of the body size and, again, what they've done so far in their careers. I think that both these guys are number ones. Obviously, Mike Evans has shown it. Chris Godwin is starting to show it this year, truly. And I think that both these wide receivers are extremely talented, and they're the best duo in the league, hands down to me. All right, let's move on to the Cardinals versus the Saints. With the Saints crushing the Cardinals 31-9. There wasn't too much to this game, really. I mean, it was a blowout. We all kind of knew it was going to be a blowout. Whether Drew Brees or Teddy Bridgewater started doesn't really make a difference. But Drew Brees is back and looking like Drew Brees with 373 yards and 3 touchdowns. He did overthrow one of his receivers, and that was his one interception for the game. It's all right. He's back. Congratulations, Drew Brees. It's always good to see a legendary quarterback come back from an injury like that. You saw him on the sidelines every single time they cut to him, exercising the crap out of that thumb. I mean, I don't think he ever stopped moving that thumb. Every time it freaking cut to him, he's sitting there up and down and side to side and up and down. God, man, I couldn't even imagine. He's back, but Teddy Bridgewater is the future of the Saints organization. At this moment, I believe that the Saints are best and the most complete team in the league. Yes, you heard me say it a little bit earlier, but they are the most complete team in the league. Going 5-0 when your starting Hall of Fame, first ballot Hall of Fame quarterback is out is literally almost unheard of. I love two-glove Teddy. I think he is the future. I think the Saints need to lock him up and have a serious conversation of how long is Drew Brees going to last. Because, Teddy's getting up there in age too. I believe he's 27, 28. Correct me if I'm wrong down in the comments section. And he's no slouch on the field. When Teddy Bridgewater first got drafted, I was a serious doubter of him. He proved me wrong in Minnesota. Then I was a big supporter of him because he proved me so wrong. I was a big supporter, and it really broke my heart when he went down with the injury. And it's good to see him doing so well with the Saints. He beat my Cowboys a couple weeks ago, which is unfortunate, and I hate to see it, but I do like to see Teddy have that success on the field. And then let's flip sides. Let's look at the Cardinals. I want to say Kyler Murray is looking better and better and more comfortable in the air raid offense each week, which is expected. That's something that happens when you get put into a new system and you're trying to learn it. He does still make stupid, dumb rookie mistakes, but he's a rookie, and we can't expect the world out of him, even though he is the number one overall draft pick. We still have to expect the development out of him, and I think that people are holding him too high of a standard. I do think he looks good, and you do see the flashes of what you expect out of him, but then he just makes these stupid mistakes that make you put your hand to your forehead and go, dude, what are you doing? I didn't really expect him to look too good against the Saints because that Saints defense is ridiculous, and he makes a lot of people look bad. They've been making a lot of people look like fools this year, and they did the same thing to Kyler Murray. I just wanted to put in there, he looks good. I think he's starting to feel good, and he's starting to get comfortable. My number one concern is I hope that he's more of a locker room presence than he gives off the vibe of. He seems very quiet, and quiet quarterbacks don't really work. Marcus Mariota seems like the quiet quarterback. Same thing with Kyler Murray. Seems like, the quiet quarterback. You need someone who's a leader, who's going to rally the troops and get you those wins and rile. Can't talk. English is hard. Rally you back from 14 points down, 7 points down for the game-winning drive. Rally these guys back and get the win. And I don't know if Kyler has that in him. Hopefully that's something he can develop and become a leader in the locker room. And hopefully he's leading on that he's quiet and not that he's actually quiet. But that's my main concern with him. That, and that he looks like he's about 14 years old on the football field. Alrighty, let's move on to the next game. Bengals versus Rams. Really, literally nothing to say about this one. Rams took this one 24-10. This game wasn't very eventful. Bengals still suck. I think they're probably worse than the Dolphins. They just don't put up any fight. Not since the first game of the season against the Seahawks, where I think they only lost by 3. I believe it is. It was by 1 score. That's what I remember. Hashtag free AJ Green. Hashtag free Joe Mixon. They're gonna get the number 1 overall pick. I think the Dolphins will get a win this season. But I don't know if the Bengals will. They look atrocious, seriously. And then obviously the only other thing to talk about is Cooper Kupp, 220-yard performance, and that's pretty much it. He's continuing to look like a beast, continuing to look like a monster, and continuing to look like the comeback player of the year, which is a little bit of a spoiler for the later on segment of the show. Alrighty, I do have a lot to say about this game. Jets versus Jaguars, 15-29 Jaguars winning this one. All right, last week I talked about Gardner Minshew versus Nick Foles. Gardner Minshew continues to look pretty good. I still hold true to what I said last week. Nick Foles needs to start when he comes back. Gardner Minshew has a fumbling problem. That's something he really, really, really needs to work on in the offseason. Dak had a fumbling problem in his first couple of years, but he only had 4 or 5. This man has, I believe it's 7 now in the year. And Nick Foles needs to come back, even though Gardner Minshew is playing well. They need Nick Foles out there. They're not paying the man all the money to just sit on the bench. The person I do want to talk about is Sam Darnold. After last week's seeing ghosts against the Patriots, it seems like Sam Darnold's ghost followed him to Jacksonville, throwing 30 times for 218 yards and 3 interceptions and a fumble that eventually just rolled out of bounds and no one recovered it, but he still fumbled. I don't put all the blame on Sam Darnold for his struggles. I believe anybody would struggle with the league's second worst offensive line in terms of pass blocking, and doesn't get much better with the run blocking either. Being ranked 3rd worst in the league, everybody knows that if you can't establish the run, then you can't really pass the ball too well unless you have an elite quarterback or an elite coach with very good game planning and play calling schemes. But for this team, it's not there. Sam Darnold has a lot of blame on his shoulders. Absolutely, there's some points where you question him. He's still a very young quarterback, and he has time to develop. He's in a sophomore year, and I think that he is probably the future of the Jets. It has yet to be seen how good he's actually going to be and how far his development is actually going to take him. But I think that he's not the only one to blame until the offensive line situation gets better. And until then, Sam Darnold and the rest of the Jets will fail, just like Le'Veon Bell. I called it before the season even started. Le'Veon Bell is going to suck this year because the Jets are going to suck this year. Okay, quote me on it. They suck. Yes, they beat the Cowboys. Dude, they suck. They are so bad. And Le'Veon Bell sucks because of it. Not because he's actually a bad running back or because he isn't a good runner anymore, or because he got paid, doesn't feel like he needed to try anymore, because he held out and got... No, it's not. It's literally just because the offensive line is awful. It's horrendous. Excuse me. And there needs to be a lot of changes on that offensive line before any winning can even think about happening in that Jets organization. Alrighty, let's move on to one of my games of the week. Last week, it wasn't my game of the week. It was just a game that I talked about. It was the Giants versus the Lions, 26-31. Wasn't really too much right about it being a shootout. It was a little bit of a shootout, but I was partially wrong. It was a pretty exciting game. I was right about Saquon having a big game through the air, but I was wrong about the Giants winning. I thought they would take the win on this one. And I was wrong about Saquon having over 100 yards rushing. I believe he had, what was it, 66, 67, something like that. Let me know if I'm wrong in the comments. Let me know what his stats were for the last game. And this Lions offense is a lot of fun to watch. It's big risk, big reward, loves to air it out, averaging 282 passing yards a game through the air, which is good for fifth in the league. And for a team that is, what are they now? They're 3-3-1. For a team that's 3-3-1 and have the fifth most yards through the air per game is kind of telling on how much they are. Big risk, big reward, and it shows their opponents they've lost against the Chiefs and the likes of the Packers too. They obviously tied against Arizona, which was a little... I don't think the Lions fans would even want to be talking about that that game, but I do think that they are going to miss Kerryon Johnson. I think it kind of showed a little bit, but honestly not too much because of how much the team passes the ball. It's not going to make too much difference on the ground. Through the air, Kerryon Johnson did make a little bit of a difference through the air. He wasn't too much of a force to be reckoned with through the passing game, but he was a presence in the backfield, and teams had to account for it, and that's when things open up for the passing game, like I talked about previously with the Jets and their offensive line. And with Ty Johnson back there, and the other kid, I forgot what his name was. Let me know who it was. It's no one intimidating, no one not a well-known name, so no one's gonna be stacking the box for that one. All right, next one I'll talk about is the Chargers versus the Bears. 17-16, Chargers taking that one. Not much to really say about this game either. Matt Nagy. I've been a defender of Matt Nagy. I've really put all the blame on, not all of it, but I put a lot of the blame on Mitchell Trubisky on how the Bears have done this season. Obviously, he got hurt, and Chase Daniels was starting for a little while, so obviously not all the blame can be put on him. But, dude, Matt Nagy kneeing the ball with 41 seconds left instead of running the ball for extra yards is really, really stupid. Really dumb. Especially when you have David Montgomery having a coming out game against the Chargers. Stupid decision. He had over 100 yards rushing. David Montgomery did. I'm sure he could have easily pounded the ball in for 5, 10, 15 extra yards on a couple of different runs. And that makes all the difference in the world. And because of that, I think I do have to place the blame on, obviously, the kicker. The kicker should be making that kick. It's not over 50. He should be making it. He should be right on the money with that one. But still, Matt Nagy could have helped the man out a little bit and ran the ball a couple more times. They had the time to do it, especially that's the big problem. Or pass the ball, get it out of bounds, something, get some extra yards. That's all I gotta say about that one. All right, Eagles versus Bills, 31-13. Eagles coming out on top on this one. Philadelphia Eagles this past Sunday looked like the Eagles everybody has been waiting for. Whether or not they keep up what they did this Sunday remains to be seen, obviously. They look like the most complete team in the NFL outside of the two teams that I talked about earlier. Field goal blocks, long passes. Carson Wentz, when I mean long passes, I just mean the long ball in general. Carson Wentz played decent, but he really didn't have to play like an MVP caliber player. He didn't have to play like a quarterback who takes over the game because you had the 1-2 punch of Howard and Sanders carrying the Eagles that entire offense for combined. They carried combined times of 26, and that was 470 yards and 2 touchdowns on the ground. Also combining for another 4 receptions for 59 yards, most of that coming from Sanders on the receiving end and Howard on the rushing end of that. If the Eagles keep this up, they'll make the wild card this year. I think the NFC is very, very, very tough, and I know it's kind of hard to say, oh, well, if they keep this up and they look like one of the most complete teams, then why can't they make the divisional? I think the Cowboys will probably keep it up, and if they don't, then the Eagles will easily run away with the division, and they'll make it in. But I still think that either way they're going to be in the wild card. They're not gonna top anybody else out in the NFC. They're going to top out the Packers or the Saints for that number 1 or 2 spot. So I was saying they're going to make the wild card. Let's move on to the next one. Falcons versus Seahawks. 20-27 was the final score. Seahawks taking that one. This game was really not as close as the score implies it was. Seahawks dominated this game. Russell Wilson is still the NFL's MVP despite not putting up crazy numbers this game. They got up early in the game. Play calling all second half was very conservative, with the exception of a handful of 15-yard throws thrown in the fourth quarter, which was closer to their goal line. I think it was like 2 back-to-back. That's pretty much all the really aggressive play calling that they had all game. When they were up about 24, when they were up, 24-0 or 24-3 or whatever it was. So, and then Chris Carson and Rashad Penny combining for 145 yards. That kind of just shows you how conservative they were. They combined for that 145 because they're running it so much because they were up so early. I think they were being a little bit too conservative, and I think the Falcons could have ended up winning the game, So I think it was bad play calling on Pete Carroll. I think that he was being conservative, which was smart, but he did it way too early. It started almost immediately in the second half, in the third quarter, and then in the fourth quarter, I think he realized, oh snap! I kind of can't be too conservative and start throwing it around a little bit. And they got out of their own end zone. And they started running the ball again. So, alrighty, let's talk Panthers versus 49ers, 13-51. Another one of my other games that I talked about. I was completely wrong about this. I'm sorry, 49ers fans. I did think you were going to lose this game. Obviously, they proved me very, 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 very wrong. Extremely wrong. That defense is absolutely insane. And at this point, you can't count the 49ers out for nothing. I thought this was a very good chance of the 49ers taking their first loss of the season. Their second half of the schedule is very tough outside of Arizona and another team, but they do play the Seahawks. They play, I believe they play the Ravens. They play a different couple really tough teams, and I believe they play the Packers too. But my takeaway isn't just about the game. It's about a particular Bosa brother, and then it's a takeaway for the other Bosa brother. So we're talking about Joey and Nick Bosa, and they're gonna be a problem, man, for a lot of time. I mean, for the coming years. We already knew about Joey Bosa and the potential he had, and the amount of disruption he can cause a team. I mean, we're looking at Joey Bosa's stats. We're looking at 7 sacks, 10 tackles for losses, 13 quarterback hits, 28 solo tackles, and 1 forced fumble. Nick Bosa sitting at also 7 sacks, 11 tackles for losses, 13 quarterback hits, 16 solo tackles, 1 forced fumble, and an interception this season. Very similar stats for the two brothers. They're going to be very, very scary for many years to come. Not just on Halloween, because the 49ers do play on Thursday night on Halloween, and we're going to be looking out for Joey Bosa to get a couple more sacks. And I think it's very possible with that bad Arizona Cardinals offensive line. So I wanted to talk about them and get my knowledge, my opinion out there for those two brothers, because they're absolutely freaking insane, and they're fun to watch. And for Nick Bosa to be a rookie and look just as good as his brother, I think it's awesome. I think it's going to be really entertaining as an NFL fan. It's going to be entertaining for the years to come. And then they were just both actually named the Defensive Player of the Week. It's the first time two brothers have ever been named Defensive Player of the Week. It's a little bit one of those obscure, pretty specific stats that the NFL comes out with. I did think that this one was kind of cool that two brothers at the same time got named Defensive Player of the Week, one for the AFC and one for the NFC, obviously, because there's two of them. I just thought it was a cool thing. Alrighty, let's move on to the next game. I literally don't have anything to talk about. Patriots versus Brown, 27-13. Patriots are winning the Super Bowl on their defense alone. I hate them. Moving on. Alrighty, the Raiders versus the Texans, 24-27. Now, this game, I was, again, a little right, a little wrong. It was very exciting. It was my game of the week. I think it was the most exciting game of the week. Even more exciting than the Packers and the Chiefs. Very, very, very impressed with both quarterbacks in this game. Deshaun Watson used his mobility and his legs better than anybody else in the NFL. I think the only person who even comes close to him is Russell Wilson, obviously. But I think Deshaun Watson is a little bit harder to take down than Russell Wilson is, and I think Russell Wilson's a little bit smarter. I think he kind of just goes down sometimes. Aaron Rodgers is pretty good with his legs too. He's not really a runner. He's just mobile. Obviously not as quick as Deshaun Watson or Russell Wilson or any of these running quarterbacks. I don't think Deshaun Watson's a running quarterback, by the way. But Aaron Rodgers, he's hard to get down. He always seems to slip away from people. I don't know how he's not too quick, but I shouldn't say quick. I think he is quick. I don't think he's too fast. He just seems very quick in and out of the pockets, running around. But again, he's not as good using his legs as Deshaun Watson, because he seems just to kind of give up the sack. I mean, we saw this. We saw this super hard to sack, because perfect example is that insane touchdown pass that ultimately won them the game. Obviously, there was lots of time left for the Raiders to come back, but man, to roll out and then he slipped out of two tackles. I mean, dude is absolutely insane. Which he did literally the exact same thing in the game before that, except his knee was down. It was very, very, very similar to last week's thing against the Colts, and it was insane. But he had 279 yards through the air with 3 touchdowns. He also had 46 yards on the ground. Fun guy to watch. Very bright future ahead of himself. I'm not sure who is going to be really the quarterback of the future, but the guy can absolutely ball, and he puts the team on his back. And Deshaun Watson's never lost a game by more than one score, so I knew this one was going to be close either way. A little bit closer than I thought. If the Texans won it, that's all right. But I think big reason why that is because Derek Carr had one hell of a game. Serious. He had a great game. I'm very impressed. And I think, if I'm honest, if the Raiders stop the clock on that final clock chewing drive by the Texans, if they stop Deshaun Watson from making that crazy running to the right and passing it to his tight end while the tight end falls down, get a first down. If they stop freaking Duke Johnson and Carlos Hyde from getting all those first downs, then Derek Carr drives down the field and he scores to win the game for the Raiders. Point blank period. He does. He played so well. He was making the throws. He was playing like the Derek Carr we saw from a couple of years ago when he broke his leg. Very impressive, but unfortunately it didn't happen, so we're kind of left with the empty stats, essentially. 285 yards, 3 touchdowns through the air. Impressive performance, just fell a little bit short. You can't put all of it on him for it falling short. You really can't. I don't think you place really any of it on him. I think that goes on the defense's shoulders, absolutely. But seriously, I think I was right about this one being the game of the week, and fun game to watch. And shout out to Josh for being a Raiders fan and you guys losing this game. Still love to see the Raiders lose just because my cousin's a Raiders fan, and I always like to talk a little shit about the Raiders, but he does the same thing. All right, let's move on to the Packers versus the Chiefs. 31-24, the Packers took this one. This was a good game. Honestly, this was the second best game of the entire day. Andy Reid is a genius. I think we saw that. I was fully expecting the Chiefs to lose by at least, 2 scores, honestly. But it shows how good this offense is and the weapons they have with Andy Reid coaching them. And really, it's not Patrick Mahomes with the weapons at his disposal. It shows Andy Reid with the weapons at his disposal, and Patrick Mahomes just seems to be, commanding them. Not commanding them, but he seems just to be using them. Andy Reid's the one commanding. I'm not saying Patrick Mahomes isn't very good, and that's what it's showing. I'm just saying it just shows how good Andy Reid is. And honestly, I saw the actual talent of the players in this game instead of, for once, focusing just on Patrick Mahomes, giving him damn near all the credit. Because that seems what happened. Oh, there's this crazy, just like last year's play. He goes and he rolls out and he makes a cross-the-body deep throw to Tyreek Hill against the Ravens. It was voted like the number one play of the year or something like that, or it was his number one play. And no one focuses on the fact that Tyreek Hill literally came back all the way back to the ball to come get that one. No one focuses on that part. Everyone just focuses on how impressive he is, which he is when it comes to throwing the football, the only person that's even comparatively good is Aaron Rodgers. Aaron Rodgers has done it better. His arm strength, his mobility, how he throws it, the angles and the weird this and that. I mean, just the only other person is Aaron Rodgers. So it's Patrick Mahomes and Aaron Rodgers when it comes to actually throwing the football. Are they the best quarterbacks of all time? No, but when it comes to the talent of throwing the football, those two guys are the best. And Patrick Mahomes does get a lot of the credit, and he deserves a lot of the credit, but it was nice to see these players. It was nice to actually be able to focus on a guy like Travis Kelce, or focus on Shady McCoy, or focus on Tyreek Hill and what's his name? Nico Hardman, I think that's how you say his name. Correct me if I'm wrong. I'm not very good with names. Just want to move on to the Packers. With them winning, that puts them at 7-1. Shows how competitive the NFC is. Honestly, I talked about it earlier. I can see a couple of teams going 10-6 and missing the playoffs, which is pretty crazy. It's happened before, but I can see two teams, let's say the Cowboys and the Eagles go 10-6. I see one of them missing the playoffs, and let's say another team goes 10-6 and they miss the playoffs. I mean, you look at that NFC, I think it's the NFC North with the Packers and the Bears and the Vikings, the Lions. Every single one of those teams are good. I think the Lions are underperforming. I think the Bears are just one piece away from putting it all together again. And obviously the Packers and the Vikings are good because their records show it. You could see it. Alrighty, let's move on. Oh, what I was saying with that, I totally just went off on a tangent and I didn't even finish with that. What I was saying is with that division, you could see one of those teams also going 10-6 and missing the playoffs and not making the wild card. Like I think it's those two divisions that are most likely to do it. Miss the playoffs after playing well. All right, let's look at Monday night. Miami versus Steelers, 24-17. I'm sorry. 14-27. I just totally was dyslexic right there and read those numbers backwards. Honestly, it's nice to see. Who cares about this game? Both teams suck. It was nice to see the play calling open up a little bit, letting Juju be Juju. I know there was a lot of crap talked about Juju. Oh, see, look, he's not a true number one. And honestly, if he's just given the chance and he has the play calling for it, then I think Juju is the number one. But I think because of the limitations when it comes to the backup quarterbacks that are in Pittsburgh, I don't think the play calls are going to be opening up too much. It was nice to see it open up a little bit, but again, they're playing the Dolphins. I kind of expected the playbook to open up a little bit because the Dolphins suck. Anyways, that's my takeaways for last week. Let me know for that section, you guys, on how much you actually like that. If you want me to shorten it up, and because I know it was kind of a long going. I tried to speed through them. So if you guys didn't watch all the games or you weren't sure what happened with all the games, I'd like to take the time, watch all the games, and go over my takeaways for it, and you guys can get your little recap for each Sunday. I know it's a little late. This episode should be actually going up on the 30th. If it's not going up on the 30th, it's going up on Spooky Day. And you guys still get your recap for the week before. Kind of just keeps you informed and gives you a little update what happened. Gives you a little update on what happened the week before. Let me know what you guys think about it and any suggestions for it, because obviously I'm open to anything. Let's move on to the next section, the NFL's most interesting games of the week for Week 9. In my opinion, this is literally just my opinion. This isn't taken off any NFL.com, ESPN, anything like that. I just looked down the list of games, say, wow, okay, let's look at last week's game. Let's look at this week's games. Let's see how each team performed, and I'm going to make my judgment on what I think are interesting games. They all don't have to have playoff implications. I just think these ones are exciting. Titans versus Panthers. That is going to be my first one. And in this one, my question is, can the Titans improve to 5-4 and make a quiet playoff push with Ryan Tannehill commanding the offense? That's where all question marks are to me. The offense ranked bottom 8 in every single offensive category, including total yards, passing yards per game, passing yards, total points per game, points, and then points per game. I mean, this offense is wretched. The only thing that's outside of those categories and it's middle of the pack is the rushing yards per game, and obviously the little bright spots that they do have in the offense. Derrick Henry, I do think A.J. Brown is a good rookie wide receiver. I've been pretty impressed with him, and I like what I see from that kid so far. But that's my question for the Titans. My question for the Panthers are, how do they bounce back after getting absolutely embarrassed by the 49ers? It's one thing to lose, but it's another thing to get absolutely destroyed and have a rookie take over that game, 3 sacks and interception against your quarterback. Obviously, it wasn't just him. It was the entire defense. Obviously, I know other guys got interceptions. I know that you guys... I know. I'm giving Nick Bosa all the credit. But seriously, 3 sacks and interception, you're taking over the game. That's just... You can't argue that. You've taken over the game. If you have 3 sacks and interception, you absolutely dominate. 51-13. It's embarrassing, seriously. I think Kyle Allen can learn and grow from this loss, and I want to see how he does it and if he does it. I think he can. It's a matter of, can he do it? He should remain the starter over Cam Newton if the Panthers have any sense, but they have a lot of loyalty to Cam Newton. But something tells me that Cam Newton is done with the Carolina Panthers. Doesn't really make me upset. I never thought that Cam Newton was too much of anything. I think his MVP season was very overrated. I think that defense was extremely good in that season. If you can't tell, I'm a little bit of a defensive guy. I know I talk a lot about defenses, how good defenses are and how impressive it is, and I like defensive matchups. So if you can't tell that, I'm very much of a defensive guy, and I think that year it was very much mostly the defense. And I don't think that Cam is very impressive, and I think Kyle Allen has a lot of potential. My one downfall to Kyle Allen is he's not very mobile, but I want to see how he comes back from a loss. Alrighty, X factor for the game on the Titans side is Ryan Tannehill. I already talked about him a little bit before. I believe the defense will continue to do their job, and if Ryan Tannehill can do his, which is all he has to be is a manager for the game. He doesn't have to be an MVP. He doesn't have to be amazing. He just has to manage the game better than Marcus Mariota did. They'll win, and they'll continue to do so after this game. And that's my X factor. If he could play well, I think they take the W on that one. And the X factor on the Panthers side is going to be the entire Panthers offense. When playing a good defense this year, the Panthers have looked rather bad and make everybody look bad. With the exception, obviously, Christian McCaffrey. He isn't the X factor because last week he had a good performance and make a single difference in the game. And they're facing another good defense. And if the offense doesn't shape up, Cam Newton might just get his job back because Kyle Allen keeps playing bad against keeps playing bad against good defenses. It shows that he's not ready to be an NFL starting quarterback. And Cam can go in there and he can sit behind Cam, which I'm fine with, and learn from him and grow from him. You know, and not saying Cam Newton's a bad quarterback or he's awful. I think he's a little overrated, but I don't think he's a bad quarterback, and I think there is stuff to learn from Cam. I think the Titans do win this one 24-13. Alrighty, and let's move on to my second game, which I only do have 2 games for you guys this week. It's going to be the game of the week for me. It's going to be everybody's game of the week, I think. Patriots versus Ravens, pretty obvious. I would think I was right about last week's game of the week about it being exciting. Texans versus Ravens. Texans versus Raiders. Wow, that was bad. I think I'm gonna go 2 for 2 after this week, being right about the game of the weeks. Patriots are coming off another monster victory on the back of their insane defense. My question for them is, when does this defense have a bad game? Every defense has a bad game, whether it's regular season, playoffs, Super Bowl. It doesn't matter. They're going to have a bad game, and that's when your quarterback needs to step up. Well, luckily, they have arguably the greatest quarterback of all time. So the defense, the Baltimore Ravens are the best team that the Patriots defense has faced. And can they stop Lamar Jackson and this top 8 offense in the league? I'm curious about that one. My question about the Ravens, or for the Ravens, is, does the extra week of study and rest help to drop a game plan good enough to allow Lamar Jackson to be Lamar Jackson? And frankly, the entire Ravens offense, you can't just allow him to do what he normally does. I'm talking about Lamar Jackson. You have to be creative, tricky with the play calling when facing Bill Belichick, and you have a quarterback who's kind of one-dimensional, if I'm being quite honest. If you drop the same old plays, then we're going to see the same old Patriots defense that we've seen all year. Lots of turnovers, lots of scoring. Okay, that's what we're going to see. All right, the X factor for the Patriots is going to be Tom Brady. If the defense is going to have a bad game this week, can the old man sling it to win the game? Of course, he's a legend, but his body's been breaking down, and he hasn't had to work as hard as he had in previous years. He's not the same old Tom Brady. I don't want to hear the outcries in the comments and the crybaby stuff. He's really not the same quarterback he used to be. It's sad, but it's true. He's not the same guy, and if he can, and he hasn't had to be the same. I'm sorry about that. He hasn't had to be the same guy because how good this defense is, and they're riding the back of that incredible defense. My X factor for the Ravens is going to be John Harbaugh. If he wants to have any chance at beating the Patriots, he has a really tough job. He has to. Game plan has to be flawless. Draw up unique and effective plays against the number 1 scoring defense in the league. And if he does that, then he has to make sure to drop a defensive game plan to disrupt Tom Brady and the Patriots. And then throw in a couple of lucky special team plays, some trickery, and you got yourself a win, Baltimore. I do think the Patriots are going to win this one, unfortunately, though. And I think it might actually be a little bit of a defensive battle, 17-10. Alrighty, you guys. I'm going to take a quick... You know what? Actually, let's power through this. Yeah, let's power through this. All right, I have my most interesting storylines of the past week. All right, let's look at the most impactful trades, ranking them in the last couple of weeks leading up to the trade deadline. I have 6 of them. One of them wasn't on my list before today. I kind of forgot about him, and then I realized, oh, crap, I'm missing a guy, and you'll see him on the list here soon. All right, my number 6 guy is going to be Kenyon Drake. He's going to make an impact, but not too much, seriously. And let me preference this or predicate this. Again, English is hard. Let me say this before. If the guy you traded for isn't on here, that means he's not going to be too much of an impact. Deal with it. Sorry. Number 6 is Kenyon Drake. The reason why he's on here, he's going to make an impact because David Johnson is probably going to miss one more week, but he's not going to start when David Johnson even comes back. And if he does in that time, if he does well in that time when David Johnson is out, then he earns some playing time, but he'll still be part of a three-headed running game when he splits reps with a number two. I'm sorry. He's going to be splitting reps with the Edmonds kid. He's not going to be splitting reps with David Johnson. David Johnson's David Johnson, but you're going to be splitting reps with the number two. That's why he's bottom at the list, but he does make the list because it's Kenyon Drake, and I think that there is a lot of potential there at running back, and it hasn't been exploited yet because he's been on the Dolphins this entire time. All right, my number 5 is going to be Aqib Talib. The only reason he is not bottom of the list is because of the slim chance he actually stays with the Dolphins and signs with them after his contract is up. He's on IR right now, and if he even plays, he won't be much of an impact on a horrible Dolphins team. I think the corners of Xavier Howard and Aqib Talib is intriguing. It's cool. It's nice. But how well and how 100% is Aqib Talib going to be even when he comes back? And will he even be on the Dolphins after this year? So that's why he's sitting close to the bottom of the list. All right. My number 4 guy is going to be Leonard Williams. The Giants traded for him. Alrighty. He's kind of a weird spot on the list. He's kind of here by default. I like the trade. I only like it, though, if he signs a long-term deal. Wow, I'm having a very tough time at the end of this podcast. It's only a good trade if he signs long-term. I do like the trade because I like Leonard Williams. The Jets have had a lot of luck when it comes to drafting defensive tackles. It seems like in the past, 6 years? But I have a feeling that the deal won't get done, unfortunately, for the Giants. They would even sign Snacks to a big deal a couple years ago, and Snacks is the best defensive tackle when it comes to stopping the run. So if they won't even sign him, Leonard Williams probably will be looking for big money, and if he is, then I know for sure that the Giants are not going to sign him. And if they do, that wouldn't surprise me because they're Giants and they're stupid. All right, let's move on to number 3. I flip-flop number 3 and number 2 a lot, and I think I have my decision. I'm going to go ahead and put Mohamed Sanu at number 3, getting traded to the Patriots. This is a good move by both teams because Mohamed Sanu needed, I think, a new scenery for him. And the Patriots can utilize him because they're about to release Josh Gordon, which I talked about last week. And the reason why it's a good move for the Atlanta Falcons is they free up the cap space because they're going to have a lot of issues with the cap space coming up pretty soon. They have to re-sign some players and give players big money, and it wasn't going to work with Mohamed Sanu sitting there. And they're going to have to make some more moves during the offseason to try to clear up some cap space to make the moves that they want to make. I think this is a great trade for the Patriots because he's a quiet guy. He seems to fit the Patriots way as far as I've seen. And as far as I've seen is he's a quiet dude who does his own thing, and I think that's good for the Patriots. My number 2 is going to be Michael Bennett to the Cowboys. I think Bennett slides in perfectly into the role that Tyron Crawford has or did have, but he's out right now for the year. It's another piece to an already very impressive Cowboys defensive line. I see D-Law breaking out at this point in the season, and because you can't really double team anyone. You can't double team. You could double team D-Law still, but then that's when Robert Quinn was getting open and not getting open, but he was getting free and getting to the quarterback, and you saw that he's been amazing since he's come back off of his suspension. And with Bennett sliding in there and causing even more disruptions, you can't double team any more of these guys. You're going to be leaving somebody free. You're going to have to single team him, and I think D-Law is absolutely going to cause a tear. And same thing with Robert Quinn. Those two guys on the outside are going to be absolutely monstrous. And if they do decide to double team D-Law still, Michael Bennett is going. Robert Quinn and Michael Bennett are going to be amazing this year. Alrighty. And my number 1 spot goes to Emmanuel Sanders going to the 49ers. I think this is great. He goes from a very, very bad team to a very, very successful team and goes at a big upgrade at quarterback. Slides right into the number one role on a very successful team. Great addition for the 49ers offense. Seriously, I expect the offense as a whole to take a whole step forward. And really a good veteran presence for the guys like Deebo Samuels and who's that other Jalen Hurns. I believe that's the kid who hasn't played too much yet. And then the Marquise Goodwin, obviously. Can't believe I just spaced on that one. I think Marquise Goodwin's going to get a lot more looks deep down the field. It's going to really open it up. I think we're going to see Emmanuel Sanders into a veteran presence role where he's going to be very possession-esque receiver instead of the deep threat, very quick guy. But I still think that people are going to underplay Emmanuel Sanders some point later down in the season and maybe even to the playoffs, and he's going to break off for a couple big deep balls because they're focusing too much on Marquise Goodwin, and that's why he's my number one. I think it's a great trade for both teams because the Broncos did get a lot of draft capital back for Emmanuel Sanders, and Emmanuel Sanders making an immediate impact for the 49ers, who are trying to win right now while their team is very good. And that's my list for the most impactful trades in the last couple of weeks leading up to the trade deadline. I do want to say the actual trade deadline, the day of, stunk. It wasn't very exciting. I kept checking my phone all day, waiting for Jamal Adams, waiting for Le'Veon Bell, waiting on a whole slew of guys to get traded. And none of it happened. Nobody was making any moves. No one could come to any terms. And I feel like I think we've seen more and more of a slowdown when it comes to the trades. Not too much of a blockbuster trade. And I know I did leave off Jalen Ramsey off this one. I think he was traded a little bit too late. And I think his circumstances are a little bit different just because he kind of forced himself out. And I don't really want to put him on the list if he's forcing himself out. And he's going to be impactful. I'll talk about it. He'll be impactful, but I think he'll probably end up leaving LA, and he's not going to re-sign them unless they give him a record contract. Alrighty, let's go ahead and wrap up the show with the midseason awards. Alrighty, these are all my opinions only. If you don't agree with them, seriously, put them in the comments. I'd love to debate with you. Seriously, it's a lot of fun to debate this type of stuff. All right, let's start off with the MVP, and I want to start with the honorable mention first. Just mention his names, talk about it for a second, and then go to the actual winner for me for the midseason. My honorable mention is Aaron Rodgers. Patrick Mahomes would be in this spot probably if it wasn't for him getting injured. I think Aaron Rodgers has played exceptionally well, but the only reason he's not the MVP is because Russell Wilson is my MVP. 2,127 yards, 20 touchdowns, 17 through the air, and 3 on the ground. Just 1 interception, 68% completion percentage with 182 yards rushing. The Seahawks are 6-2. It's Russell time this year with Patrick Mahomes being injured. Open up the race for Russell. He was already hot on his trail. Even with Patrick Mahomes being in there, he was hot on his trail. I believe it broke a streak with Patrick Mahomes being the number one QB in the league on their quarterback index, and he got tied with Russell Wilson. I mean, he was hot on his trail. He's played exceptionally well with him getting injured. It sucks, but Russell Wilson is the MVP for me this year, and I think he will eventually keep playing well, and I think that he will. He's going to be the MVP at the end of the season too. Alrighty, let's move on to the Offensive Player of the Year. I always kind of thought it was weird for the Offensive Player of the Year and then the MVP, whatever. Same thing with Defensive Player of the Year. It is what it is. All right, my honorable mention is Michael Thomas. I don't think the dude gets talked about much, especially with last year leading the league in receptions as that type of big body receiver. It doesn't really happen too much, and he's doing it again this year, receptions and his yards, and he's looked phenomenal. And Teddy Bridgewater was his quarterback. It wasn't even Drew Brees, and he's still leading everybody by a mile and yards. He's been incredible. My Offensive Player of the Year is Christian McCaffrey, 735 yards rushing, 10 total touchdowns, with 2 of them being receiving, 8 being on the ground. No fumbles, 39 receptions, 343 yards through there, and only one drop pass as a halfback. The reason why he's my MVP is because he has that potential to take over games. We've seen it in the past, and he's won games almost by himself. He's the undisputed, for me, offensive player of the year. Alrighty, let's move on to defensive player of the year. My honorable mention is Stephon Gilmore. The reason why Stephon Gilmore isn't my defensive player of the year is because I'm not really comfortable making him my defensive player of the year. While the Patriots haven't played really anybody super notable. I'm not comfortable with making him the defensive player of the year, but I am very comfortable with making Myles Garrett my defensive player of the year. 10 sacks, 17 solo tackles, 13 quarterback hits, 2 forced fumbles, 19 quarterback pressures, only 1 missed tackle. Pretty impressive. I know Shaq Barrett has the same amount of sacks as Myles, but Shaq Barrett was more fluky. He kind of just burst on the scene, and now people have kind of slowed him down at this point. And Garrett is just gradual, and it's actual talent. There was a reason why he was the number 1 pick a couple of years ago. I don't know if you knew that, but he was. Obviously, I'm just messing around. Yeah, no, he's been very impressive for the Browns, and he was a lot of people's picks for the defensive player of the year this year, and I think that a lot of people are going to be getting that right by the end of the season. But I feel like defensive player of the year, more than almost any other award, is more open and anybody can get it. And I think it's a unique award because of that. Because I feel like offensive player of the year, MVP, all that stuff is almost mind made up by like week 12 almost, and there's still a couple weeks left to play, like a whole quarter of a season left to play after that, and people kind of just shut their brains off, and it's kind of game over after that. Alrighty, move on to my offensive rookie of the year. It's nobody else but Josh Jacobs. Okay, Terry McLaurin gets an honorable mention, but that's pretty much it. No, that's all he gets. He's looked impressive. I talked about him a little earlier. Josh Jacobs has 620 rushing yards, 4 total touchdowns, 0 fumbles, 11 receptions for 102 yards. This guy is a workhorse, 6th in the league in rushing. His yards per game is 5th. He's ahead of guys like Saquon and Zeke. I know Saquon was hurt. Zeke wasn't. Zeke wasn't hurt, and he still is 5th in yards per game. I've been extremely impressed by this guy. This guy is your stereotypical workhorse running back, and I've really enjoyed watching him. I'm a big running back guy. I'm a big defensive guy, and Josh Jacobs has the stuff to be a great running back in this league. Not super explosive, I do want to say, but he's a bruiser like Zeke. He kind of reminds me in that facet, but obviously the Raiders don't have as good as an offensive line as Zeke. No, I'm not saying talent-wise he's as good as Zeke, but he's up there, and I'm sure he'll get there soon. Defensive Rookie of the Year, there's no honorable mention. Seriously, nobody even gets a mention. Not like the Offensive Rookie there where Terry McLaurin got a little bit of a mention. No honorable mention here. It's Nick Bosa is the Defensive Rookie of the Year. Talked about his stats earlier. 7 sacks, 16 solo tackles, 13 quarterback hits, 1 forced fumble, 1 interception, 22 quarterback pressures, 1 missed tackle only. The dude is getting consideration for defense, serious consideration for Defensive Player of the Year. And honestly, that's enough for me to get Defensive Rookie of the Year. I don't think I need to explain myself any further. I think he's already a cornerstone in that defense as a rookie. And I've really liked seeing what he's done so far for that 49ers defense. Alrighty, my Comeback Player of the Year is my honorable mention for Comeback Player of the Year, I should say, is Travis Frederick. I'm a homer on this one. I know. I'm sorry. It probably should be a guy like Dalvin Cook, but for me, it's Travis Frederick. It's nice seeing the big man back playing center for the Cowboys, and he's played well. He's played like Travis Frederick. I really haven't had to say his name too much when watching the games because dude just doesn't make mistakes, and it's fun to watch him. And if you haven't had the chance to watch a Cowboys game with Travis Frederick, just look at the center. Look how he plays. He's a mauler and fun guy to watch, and he's a good story in the NFL. But my Comeback Player of the Year is going to go to Cooper Kupp. 58 receptions, 792 yards, 5 touchdowns, 404 yards for or after the catch. So he has over half his yards is after the catch. So that means he's doing a lot of this by himself. It's not the quarterback throwing deep to him and boom, chops it in. No, he's doing a lot of this work by himself and only one drop pass. I think the percentage is 1.1% of his targets are drops. So extremely low. It's pretty similar numbers actually to what he was having 2 years ago. The year he wasn't hurt, last year he was. Year before that, it's very similar numbers to what he had before. I think he sealed his spot for the mid-season award after the last game. He's the Rams MVP on offense, and I think it's very obvious. And last year, if they would have had him, I think they would have won the Super Bowl. I know I said it. Let's not just move on for that. Let me explain that why. It was a defensive battle, and if Cooper Kupp would have been there, it would have been such a defensive battle. They would have opened it up big time, and they would have won that one, I think. And Coach of the Year the honorable mention goes to Frank Reich, the coach for the Colts. Nobody expected the Colts to be here at this point, and it's been a fun ride to watch them. They're a fun team to watch. And I like watching the Colts because they're a good story. And I liked Andrew Luck. I always did. And seeing Jacoby Brissett succeed is good. And I think it's good for the NFL. But my coach of the year is Sean Payton. Hall of Fame quarterback is out for 5 games. You rally the troops enough to win all 5 of those with your backup quarterback. Saints are 7-1. I think it speaks for itself. I kind of talked about it a little earlier in the game. A little earlier in the podcast. This is in the game. Those are my mid-season awards. If you disagree with me, if you think I missed something, and in this entire podcast, if you think I missed something, let's go ahead and wrap this one up. Put it in the comment section below. I still do want to do a segment where my followers or my subscribers leave comments in the comment section below. Just give me a couple questions. Hey, you know what? Just give me NFL questions. Anything, and I'll answer them on the podcast at the end of the show. Let me know if I can improve on anything. If you guys liked the music in the beginning, it was made by me. If you have any suggestions for that one either, love to hear those. Leave a like, leave a subscription for me if you're listening to this on YouTube, which I'm assuming you are. And this has been the HG Sports Podcast. It is, again, October 30th. Hope you guys have a wonderful, spooky day, the best day of the year. I'm your host, Jacob. Peace.